Two people can be the exact same age, the same birth certificate, the same number of birthdays, yet biologically, they could be living in completely different decades. One is still hiking mountain trails, tending the garden, and chasing grandkids across the backyard. The other pauses before opening a stubborn jar. On paper, they're identical. Inside their bodies, they're aging at very different speeds. Here's what surprises most people. Doctors actually have a name for this gap. More importantly, they can measure it.
I think they glue these shut.
Long before major health problems appear, there are quiet signs that reveal which direction your body is heading. Today, I'll show you 9 of them, and by the end of this video, you'll know how to recognize them, in yourself or in someone you care about. Here's the interesting part. Researchers who study aging don't judge it by birthdays anymore. They judge it by function. How fast you walk, how strong your grip is, how quickly you recover after illness or physical stress. These simple measurements often reveal more about your future health than your actual age. In some cases, they predict future health just as well, and sometimes even better, than the number on your birth certificate. This isn't an experimental idea anymore. Healthy aging clinics around the world now use these kinds of assessments because they reveal things age alone simply cannot. And I'd encourage you to stay with me until the very end, because the final sign on this list may be the most revealing of all. It takes less than 10 seconds to test, yet almost nobody realizes how much it can reveal about the speed at which the body is aging. I'm Dr. William Mercer. For years, I've studied research in healthy aging and geriatric medicine with one goal: turning complex science into practical advice you can actually use. No products, no miracle supplements, no expensive programs. Just what the research shows, what these signs actually mean, and what you can do if you notice them. But before we begin, there's one idea that changes everything. Chronological age and biological age are not the same thing. Chronological age is simply how many birthdays you've celebrated. Biological age reflects how well your body is actually functioning. And here's the encouraging part. It doesn't always move at the same speed as the calendar. To a meaningful degree, it's influenced by the choices you make over time. Doctors estimate this using a research framework called frailty. Now, don't let that word put you off. It isn't meant to label anyone. Its purpose is much more practical, to detect small declines early, while there's still real opportunity to slow them or even improve them. The original framework focuses on 5 core measurements: grip strength, walking speed, persistent exhaustion, unintentional weight loss, and physical activity. When several of these begin appearing together, researchers can predict, with remarkable accuracy, who's more likely to experience falls, hospitalization, and loss of independence in the years ahead. For this video, I've expanded that framework to 9 signs by including several additional indicators that clinicians routinely pay attention to. Together, they paint a much clearer picture of how your body is really aging. So let's begin with the very first one. And it starts with something so ordinary, most people never think twice about it. When was the last time you tried opening a stubborn jar and actually struggled? Take a second. Picture the last one you opened. Did it feel harder than it used to? It sounds almost too small to matter. But that's exactly why so many people miss it. Grip strength is one of the most studied predictors in aging research because your hands don't weaken on their own. They reflect the health of your muscles, your nervous system, and your overall physical resilience. That's what makes grip strength so valuable. It's objective, it's easy to measure, and it often begins changing long before bigger problems become obvious. In one large international study involving more than 100,000 adults, grip strength predicted the risk of early death better than blood pressure alone. Other large studies have linked weaker grip strength with a higher risk of future health problems, including cardiovascular disease. That's remarkable for something as simple as squeezing with your hand. Imagine someone like Ruth. She'd always been the person who never asked for help. Then, sometime in her late 60s, she quietly started handing stubborn jars to her husband. She laughed it off. "Your hands are just bigger." It sounded perfectly reasonable. What she didn't realize was that a year earlier, she wouldn't have needed to ask at all. That's how these changes usually happen. Not overnight, not dramatically. Quietly enough that they simply become part of your routine. So here's something worth remembering. If opening jars or other everyday tasks requiring hand strength has gradually become more difficult over the last year or two, don't simply brush it aside. By itself, it isn't a diagnosis, but it can be one of the earliest signals that your body is beginning to change. Now, let's move to another sign, one that many aging specialists describe as the sixth vital sign, right alongside blood pressure, heart rate, and breathing: your walking speed. Here's something I'd like you to think about. When was the last time you paid attention to how fast you naturally walk? Most people never do, but doctors often do. Because a comfortable walking pace reflects something much bigger than your legs. It reflects your strength, your balance, your heart, your lungs, your nervous system, all working together. That's why clinicians sometimes measure how long it takes someone to walk just a short distance. That single number can predict health outcomes across nearly every major body system. One finding surprised researchers. The change is usually so gradual, the person experiencing it rarely notices. But someone who hasn't seen them for several months often does. Maybe you've heard a friend or family member say, "You seem to be walking a little differently." It may sound like casual observation, or even criticism, but sometimes it's your body revealing a change before you ever feel it yourself. It may be one of the earliest warnings your body gives you. So how can you tell if it's happening to you? Think back to the last time you walked with friends or family. Were you the one setting the pace, or the one quietly trying to keep up? Has crossing the street before the signal changes started feeling just a little more rushed than it used to? These aren't dramatic changes. They're subtle, and that's exactly why they're so easy to miss. Here's something worth remembering. The speed you walk today may reveal more about your future health than almost any single number on a lab report. Now, let's move to something even more surprising. Most people assume muscle loss begins with obvious weakness. It usually doesn't. It often begins with the movements you gradually stop doing, without even realizing it. Try a quick experiment. Picture yourself standing up from a low couch or chair. What's the very first thing you do? Do you rise in one smooth motion? Or do your hands automatically reach for the armrest? That tiny movement tells doctors far more than most people realize. In fact, it's part of a standardized clinical assessment used by geriatric specialists. They don't simply count how many times someone can stand up in 30 seconds. They also watch how they stand. Using your hands isn't laziness, and it doesn't necessarily mean you've become weak overnight. More often, it's your body quietly compensating for gradual changes in leg and core strength. The transition happens so slowly that most people never notice the day it began. 1 month, you're standing up without thinking. Months later, you're pushing yourself up every single time, without realizing anything has changed. Imagine someone like Gerald. He always kept a cane beside his favorite chair. Not because he relied on it for walking. He walked just fine. But each time he stood up, he instinctively used the cane for support. To him, it wasn't a warning sign. It was simply being practical. It wasn't until his daughter visited that anyone noticed how often it was happening. Sometimes the people around us notice these quiet changes long before we do. And that's exactly why this matters. The muscles that lift you out of a chair are the same muscles that help prevent serious falls. We'll come back to that shortly. For now, remember this. If you've gradually started using your hands to stand, don't ignore it, even if you can't remember when it started. Because the next sign is one many people mistake for nothing more than having a busy week. Persistent exhaustion. Not the kind you feel after spending all day working in the yard or after a long trip. The kind that lingers, even after you've rested. This is actually one of the 5 core signs researchers use when assessing biological aging. And the screening question is surprisingly simple. Think about the past week. Did almost everything feel like an effort? Did you struggle just to get going more days than not? If you quietly answered yes, don't dismiss it too quickly. That's exactly what many people do. They blame stress, poor sleep, a hectic schedule, almost anything, except the possibility that their body is trying to tell them something. The key difference is persistence. Normal tiredness improves after good rest. This kind of fatigue often doesn't, or it improves far less than you'd expect. So here's the important point. Persistent exhaustion isn't simply part of getting older. It can be a measurable physical signal that's worth discussing with your doctor. Let's pause for just a moment. We've already covered 4 signs: reduced grip strength, a slower walking pace, needing your hands to stand. and ongoing fatigue. Notice what they all have in common. None of them are diseases. They're everyday changes, quiet signals your body has probably been sending for months before they ever become obvious problems. And the next sign is probably the most misunderstood so far, because at first, it often feels like good news. Before we continue, let's clear up one common myth. Many people believe these changes are simply the price of getting older, that nothing can really be done. Fortunately, that's not what the evidence shows. Aging is inevitable, but many of the changes we've talked about can be slowed and, in some cases, meaningfully improved through consistent lifestyle habits. Now, here's another myth. If you're losing weight without trying, that must be a good thing. Not necessarily, especially later in life. Unexplained weight loss over just a few months, without changing your diet or exercise, can be one of the most important warning signs on this list. Because what you're losing may not be fat, it may be muscle. And muscle does much more than help you lift heavy objects. It helps regulate blood sugar, supports your immune system, keeps your metabolism working efficiently, and protects your independence as you age. Here's what makes this especially tricky. Sometimes your weight barely changes at all, yet muscle is gradually disappearing, while body fat quietly increases. Doctors even have a name for this pattern: sarcopenic obesity. From the outside, everything can appear perfectly normal, but underneath, your body composition has changed in ways that matter. That's why the number on the scale never tells the whole story. If your clothes are fitting noticeably looser and you weren't trying to lose weight, it's worth mentioning to your doctor. Often, a simple evaluation and routine blood work are enough to begin understanding what's happening. So remember this: weight loss you didn't work for isn't something to celebrate automatically. It's something to understand, because the next sign brings many of these changes together. A fall isn't usually just bad luck. Most of the time, it's the visible result of changes that have been developing quietly for months, sometimes even years. Weaker muscles, slower reflexes, reduced balance. But here's what many people miss. The real warning often comes before the fall. It's the near falls, that moment you suddenly grab the kitchen counter, the stumble you barely catch, the split second when you think, that was close. Those moments matter just as much. In many ways, they matter even more, because they're warnings before there's an injury. Imagine someone like Patricia. At nearly every family dinner, she'd laugh and say, "Nearly took a tumble again today." Everyone smiled. She smiled too. The conversation moved on. No one stopped to ask why it kept happening, not even during her routine medical appointments. That's how warning signs often hide. Not because they're invisible, but because they slowly become normal. Here's what many people get wrong. They start worrying after the fall, but the real warning usually comes long before it. By the time a fall leads to a broken bone, the loss of strength, balance, and stability has often been building quietly for a year or even longer. So here's something worth remembering. A near fall isn't just an embarrassing moment. It's your body giving you information before it has to give you an injury. And the next sign is even easier to miss because you see it every single day: your skin. Take a moment and think. Have you noticed small cuts taking longer to heal than they used to? Or bruises appearing from bumps that barely seemed worth remembering? On their own, those changes don't necessarily mean anything serious, but together they can tell an important story. Healthy skin depends on good blood flow, healthy collagen, and a well-functioning immune system. As those systems gradually change with age, your skin often becomes one of the first places to show it. That's why many clinicians think of skin as a window into what's happening beneath the surface. If the smallest blood vessels aren't delivering what your skin needs to repair efficiently, it's reasonable to ask whether similar changes may be occurring elsewhere in the body. That doesn't mean every bruise is a warning sign. Skin naturally becomes thinner with age. Bruising more easily can simply be part of that process. What matters is change. If your skin suddenly heals much more slowly than it did a few years ago, that's worth mentioning at your next checkup. Because small changes are often the earliest ones, and your skin has a remarkable way of noticing them first. Now, here's something you can check without any special equipment. Think back to an old family photograph. Have you ever looked at it and wondered, was I always that much taller? It may sound surprising, but losing height is a real medical finding. In many people, it's linked to gradual bone loss in the spine. Over time, tiny compressions in the vertebrae can slowly reduce your height. A more stooped posture often follows. That's one reason many doctors routinely measure height during checkups. A loss of around 1.5 inches or more from your tallest adult height is generally worth discussing with your doctor. Imagine two women, the same age, very similar lifestyles. One began regular bone density screening in her 50s. The other never thought she needed it. Years later, her doctor noticed she'd become noticeably shorter. Only then did testing reveal significant bone loss. The difference wasn't where they started. It was when they discovered the problem. One had years to respond. The other had already lost valuable time. So don't dismiss a change in height as just getting older. It could be your body asking for a closer look. And now we've reached the final sign, the one I've been building towards since the beginning of this video. According to many researchers, it may be the strongest predictor on this entire list. But before we talk about it, there's one important misconception to clear up. This isn't about dementia, and it isn't about serious memory loss. If you're experiencing either of those, please discuss them with your doctor. What we're talking about is much more subtle. Maybe it takes an extra second to find the word you're looking for. Maybe fast conversations feel slightly harder to follow. Or maybe your thoughts arrive just a little slower than they once did. Here's why researchers take this so seriously. Processing speed doesn't only reflect what's happening inside your brain. It reflects what's happening throughout your body. Blood flow, inflammation, cellular repair. The very same biological processes affecting your muscles, your balance, and your walking speed are often influencing your brain at exactly the same time. That's why I saved this sign for last. It doesn't stand apart from the others. It connects them. It's another window into the same aging process we've been talking about all along. So how can you check it for yourself? Think about your recent conversations. When several people are talking at once, do you find yourself needing an extra second to keep up? Not because you didn't hear them, but because your brain needs just a little more time to process what's being said. Or perhaps you notice yourself pausing, searching for a familiar word that once came effortlessly. That small delay may seem unimportant, but researchers pay close attention to it. And here's the interesting part. Unlike the other signs, you can test this one right now. Grab a timer, set it for 15 seconds. When you're ready, name as many animals as you can. Go. It's a simplified version of a cognitive screening exercise clinicians sometimes use. No, it's not a diagnosis, but it can give you an honest snapshot of your processing speed today. So don't panic if you need an extra second. What matters isn't perfection. What matters is noticing a meaningful change compared with your own normal. Now, take a step back. Look at the entire picture. These aren't 9 separate problems. They're 9 different windows into the same body. Your muscles, your blood vessels, your bones, your brain. All aging together. And here's the part one hopes stays with you long after this video ends. Almost every one of these signs responds to the same small group of healthy habits. That's the opposite of what many people believe. Most people think aging is a one-way street, that once decline begins, there's nothing left to do. Fortunately, that's not what the evidence shows. The research tells a much more hopeful story. One of the most encouraging discoveries in healthy aging research is this. Many of these changes are not as permanent as people assume. Even individuals showing several of these signs have improved meaningful aspects of their health through targeted lifestyle changes. Not overnight, not perfectly, but often far more than they expected. If there's one habit that stands above almost everything else, it's strength training. No other single activity influences as many of the signs we've discussed. Research consistently shows that just 2 or 3 sessions each week can improve grip strength, walking speed, leg strength, balance, bone health, and even lower the risk of falls. And before you picture heavy barbells or crowded gyms, that's not what we're talking about. Resistance bands, body weight exercises, light dumbbells, even standing up from a sturdy chair several times in a row can be an effective place to start. The goal isn't intensity, it's consistency. Your muscles also need the right fuel. That's why protein becomes increasingly important as we age. Here's something many people don't realize. Appetite often decreases with age, but the body's need for protein doesn't. In fact, maintaining muscle may require paying more attention to protein than you did when you were younger. Balance deserves attention too. You don't need complicated routines. Something as simple as standing on one foot while brushing your teeth can gradually improve stability over time. Regular bone density screening helps detect changes long before they become major problems. And staying mentally and socially engaged through conversations, hobbies, learning, and meaningful relationships helps support the same processing speed we talked about earlier. Notice what's interesting about all of this. None of these habits require becoming a different person. You don't need a perfect diet. You don't need to spend hours exercising every day. You simply need to do the right things often enough for your body to respond. So if you remember only one thing from this entire video, let it be this. Start some form of strength training this week, even 10 minutes, twice. It may be the single decision most likely to improve several of these signs at the same time. Before you leave, I'd like you to think of one person, a parent, a spouse, a brother, a sister, a close friend, someone who has quietly started asking for help opening jars, someone who now pushes themselves out of a chair, someone whose walk has become just a little slower. Share this video with them, not because something is wrong, not to frighten them, and certainly not to criticize them. Share it because sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is the chance to notice a problem while there's still plenty of time to change its direction. And before you go, I have one final question. Out of these 9 signs, which one surprised you the most? Or maybe one made you stop and think, that's happening to me. If so, tell me the number in the comments. I genuinely enjoy reading them. One last reminder, everything we've covered today is educational. It's not intended to diagnose any medical condition. If you've noticed several of these signs in yourself or someone you care about, the next step isn't worry. It's a conversation with a qualified healthcare professional who can evaluate your individual situation. And I'll leave you with one final thought. Your birth certificate tells you how many years you've been alive. It does not tell you how well your body is aging. That's what these 9 signs reveal. The jar that suddenly feels harder to open. The chair you quietly push yourself out of. The walk around the block that seems just a little slower. Individually, they don't seem important. Together, they tell a story. The good news is that stories can change. Notice the signs early. Take action while those small changes are still small. Because healthy aging isn't about becoming perfect. It's about making small decisions that quietly change where tomorrow leads. Thank you for watching. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dr. William Mercer.